That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast exploring the intersection of faith and fear, where every single week, except the ones where we don't, we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And guys, he was here a minute ago, but he cryptically said, "I don't think they're coming." And then he kind of disappeared. It was weird. I think he'll be back. I hope he'll be back. While we await his hoped-for arrival, though, allow me to welcome you to a brand new series that is formally beginning today, even though it technically began last week with, surprise, a B-side on Marvel's The Avengers Infinity War, which served as a bit of a prologue for us. We hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you to frequent guest Ian Olson for contributing to the fun. That episode is meant as a front bookend for this overarching series. It's a series meant to resonate directly with our current local and global moment as we wrestle through our shared sorrow. Far be it for me to over-explain the series, because here at the Fear of God, we do not explain, we explore, except when I explain that right now, unlike toilet paper, you can find us anywhere podcasts are sold. And if you'd be so kind, we would welcome a 5-star rating or review on iTunes. Thank you, Si. And as well as all that, your home for all things foggy, save that of Nelson, is the fearofgodpodcast.com, wherein you'll find episode archives as well as merchandise for the show, including things like cell phone cases and t-shirts and campaign buttons and pillows and maybe some face masks and some magnets. And Reed, what the sheet are you wearing? You look like a beekeeper a little bit, the way your hat is extending the sheet out. And I'm so glad we're doing video now. Oh my goodness, that was perfect.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Was a Lackey story there for a minute. What a great
Lackey story.
What a great
theater near you.
We've been doing this little bit about you being absent for quite some time now on the show, and what an incredibly amazing new manifestation of this. It's like it now is a sight gag, and
oh yes,
I hope you're okay with that, because it's where we're at.
It's gonna have to, it forces me to up my game, which is stressful. But
yeah. Riri, so one, hey, look, we can see each other, and on a certain level, when we work all this out, the listeners now are viewers as well.
That's crazy. That's really crazy.
All of the dots, all of the I's are still getting dotted and T's are still getting crossed, but we see you and they see me, and here we are.
Indeed.
Reed, I do want to, we can't drift too far from 2020. I do want you to tag in real quick, because there's a little bit of housekeeping. Take care of that, and then I got another sort of question for you.
Yes. So listeners, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, we concluded the first phase of hashtag 2020, our countdown of your top favorite horror films from each year, starting in 2000, going all the way to 2020. Now, we have taken a pause. We covered Dr. Sleep with all of our friends for the next Quarterly King. Then we dropped a surprise for you with Infinity War. And now we are launching into this new series, which Nathan and I will talk about in just a moment. But while that is there, we must not lose sight of it. Go to fearofgodpodcast.com, click on the banner on the top, and you will see there the surveys for 2009 and 2010. So we need your votes. Go there and cast your votes for your favorite horror films for 2009 and 2010, because when season 1 of what we're doing right now is concluded, we're going to take a brief break and cover those couple of years. So we need your votes to select your favorite horror films of 2009 and 2010. Go to fearofgodpodcast.com, cast your votes. It's going to be great. So yes.
2010, but you used a good word a moment ago, pause. And that's kind of what we are collectively doing a bit globally, and reflected in our taking a break from 2020 for a moment. I do want you to expound on the series, but before you do that, Reed, did you ever think in like 3 years of the fear of God, not only that we would end up covering Infinity War, marking our, dive into the deep ocean of the MCU, but that we would do it in only the fear of God way, which is like, hey, the MCU, it's the biggest sort of movie franchise in history, and so many billions of dollars being made. By the way, let's all cry and be sad. It's like
That
only
so
the fear of God
way.
can say, you know what? Yes, MCU, but
right.
the
Right,
sad,
right, right.
the sad part, like the Deathbringer MCU.
Exactly. Our very first one is arguably the tragedy. That's the one we start with.
Well,
Uh,
it's funny. I am being jokey because my tendency is to, it's a coping mechanism, Reed.
I understand.
But
I wear bed sheets.
yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, it's just kind of where we're at. Like,
nice little tent.
People thought, oh, they're making a reference to the movie. Like, nope, that's just what Reed has started doing. I want you to articulate the specificity, but to sort of open the door for you here. Like, I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I'm hopeful. Adjacent to the films, and you articulated this at the end of Infinity War. We're stepping into a TV guidepost that kind of spines the whole thing we're doing here. Why don't you, if it's all right, just take a minute and just what are we doing? What is the goal? If for some reason someone didn't listen to Infinity War, but
right.
That was a fun episode, even though
it was.
in a sad place.
They should go,
what are we
they
doing?
should go listen to it. So we are spending the next several weeks with little breaks in between to tag back in on 2020, 2020. We're going to be covering the HBO series, The Leftovers. And the biggest intention behind doing that was with the global moment that we're in, and with so much consideration around weighty moments of tragedy and trauma and this profound pause, as has come into play in several aspects of the conversation, just that word. We wanted to take a moment and just look at grief and loss, and really I think it is more than that, just the tragedy of occurrences where your world is upended and turned upside down, and you don't really know exactly if or when things will be okay, which is a large part about why we started with Infinity War, because it is very easy in light of other things that took place in MCU, and now 1 year later we had a different film to kind of close the loop on it. But when Infinity War came out, that was all you had, was just the ending, and the ending was with half of them gone, and not knowing exactly how things were going to be okay. And The Leftovers felt like a really appropriate sort of similar examination, where the premise of the show, The Leftovers, is that 2% of the population have just vanished.
The global population.
The global population. Yeah, it is a rapture-like event, devastating in its implications, but only 2% of the population. So there are places that were not entirely affected by it, or not directly affected by it, but definitely just a titanic occurrence. And I feel like right now we are going through, with the impact of COVID-19, the reactions in various places from different people to that event. The Leftovers felt like a particularly prescient show to carry us through this. And in that spirit, so that I can wind this down, we're also doing this seasonally in phases. So season 1 will have sort of a different set of films than season 2 and season 3. So we are launching into that cycle of 4 films and a conversation about season 1 of The Leftovers. That is what you're in for, ladies and gentlemen, for the next 4 or 5 weeks.
And my 2% note there is, and it's especially poignant to me, having watched episodes now 1 through 4 of season 1. What the thing I love about that show, and why it felt important and worth our time, is the show is not interested ultimately in what really happened and where
Right.
are these people.
Right.
The show is interested in how now do you live,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways the question is how can you, that
Yeah.
you know
Right.
that
Certainly.
presents itself, but more than that, as an overarching sort of meditation, it's in the face of tragedy, both global and intimate, how do you press forward, how do you move forward?
Right.
And that felt
Certainly.
really, because of the nature of this show, particularly being what it is, that felt real like a worthwhile exercise
Yeah.
for us
Certainly. Certainly.
on the show. Right.
Are you ready? I don't know if I am.
Doing this on a video setting is a lot different than knowing that it's only in audio format, but nonetheless, we begin now our first TV guideposts of 2020, the eerily prescient HBO series based on the Tom Perrotta novel, adapted and show ran by our mutual favorite Damon Lindelof, The Leftovers, starring Justin Theroux and a bevy of other folks whose names are not in front of me currently. Today, on this episode, we will be discussing episodes 1 and 2 of season 1 of The Leftovers. And now, to Mapleton.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank
That
you.
was wonderful.
Reed.
Really puts me right there. Right there with you.
Yeah. Reed, we're talking about The Leftovers.
I know, isn't that crazy?
It feels like it's like the most right and the weirdest thing to be doing right now for you and I.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that still the shorthand for us is, we're a podcast about, faith and life and horror films, but really that mantra has changed, particularly the last year or so, to just examining what scares us in order to find what saves us. And that isn't exclusive to the horror genre. I said that, a bit in the conversation about Infinity War, but it's broader.
Well, and so dialing in on The Leftovers, I have a memory. You can correct this if it needs to be done, because my memory is what it is. But I feel like, am I wrong? Did I push you to watch the show? Is that
not
correct?
wrong at all?
Okay.
You're responsible for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
yeah,
that's all I was gearing up for. I just love it.
Figured. Yeah, this is really your fault.
Yeah. We're going to get to a thing, if I remember to say it, because it's not my notes, for something that you're responsible for when we get to the movie in my life. But, perhaps I'll get to it in time. Perhaps I won't when we finally reach the culminating Fear of God episode on Leftover Season 1. But Leftover Season 1 caught me in a real particular moment in life that kind of felt both needing to grieve and have the catharsis this show provides, but also, just as you and I, a listener of 2 episodes knows, we're massive Lindelof fans, and so I kind of followed him to this show having no idea what I was in for. And I have not read the book. I know you have, but yes, if you're curious, it is based on a book, but only season 1 of the show is based on the book. From there, they sort of pivot in wildly different directions with roughly the same characters. But any listener right now, or viewer, who may have expressed interest in the show before and may have even dabbled in season 1, we will even readily acknowledge season 1 is very heavy.
It is, yeah.
Almost to an extreme sense. I reference a number of times through the course of The Fear of God's Life, the show, the podcast, The Watch, with Andy Greenwald and Chris Ryan as part of the Ringer Network. And they both come from the TV criticism world. And Greenwald specifically bashed season 1 of The Leftovers as too dour, and actually came around rather significantly in the subsequent seasons, to the point of where he became an ardent cheerleader of it. So just know, listener, if you're like, oh my God, I watched 1 or 2 of those and that's awful, it is.
Right.
It is.
Yes.
And we can, as we move through the show, move through the series, discuss the arcs and pivots, and maybe pull some Lindelof quotes later on. But season 1, just to prep you, it is heavy.
Very much so.
But with all of that sort of those building blocks out of the way, I know you and I have both only seen it through the one time. I feel like I rewatched episode 1 once, but that's it. Of my refreshers. You referenced a minute ago, 2% of the world's population has been, kind of Thanos. You can almost envision the Infinity War happens, and the series The Leftovers is what happens between it and Endgame.
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. It's people wrestling with this.
Just all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't totally know the inroads into this other than just start picking apart components.
Well, and for listeners who may not have caught up with our formatting of TV Guideposts, we're going to spend the next few episodes for maybe 10 to 15 minutes talking about a pair of episodes in more cursory fashion, maybe glancing off of some deeper waters, but for the most part, just talking about the mechanics of what happens in the episodes. And then this little mini series will culminate in a fuller, richer thematic discussion about season 1 of The Leftovers. So we're about to dive into episodes 1 and 2, just what happens and what we liked about it and what it made us think.
That was a very meta moment, because it was also Reed warding me off from getting too deep here. So I appreciate it.
No problem.
You've got your primary characters. You've got Kevin Garvey, his daughter Jill, but actually some of these relationships aren't fully clear at the outset. We just have seen it, so we know that. I guess we can spoil some of these things, but Tommy, who is his son, but not his biological son, his estranged wife, Lori, who is part of this guilty remnant. One of the things that will be returned to over and over as we discuss the show is, I remember specifically either listening to or reading an interview with Lindelof around the time the series was releasing, of how with a global event like this, what that does to pivot the axis of religion on the whole. Like new religions themselves would develop based around a phenomena so
right
inexplicable. And the guilty remnant we're introduced to is this ascetic, I think would be an appropriate word. Is cult a right word? I mean, I guess,
it applies.
All the earmarks of
recontextualizing
an entire lifestyle. But this guilty remnant is a thing that has developed, this group of people that has developed. They smoke incessantly, they wear white completely, and they don't speak. And his estranged wife Lori has become enmeshed in this cult. I will throw out one more sort of note here and then let you take over wherever you want for episode 1. I adore Ann Dowd. She is amazing. And just seeing her show up in this episode, I was like, oh my God, I love her so much. I mean, like, she does so, to me, she's kind of like a current era Kathy Bates in terms of just that.
I think that's a great comparison.
Style.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I love Ann Dowd.
I think that's a great comparison. And I think that the difficulty I have is how frequently she plays terrible people.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's because she's such a remarkable actor and such a powerful presence whenever she's in a scene. It is just, she always plays people in Handmaid's Tale, in a film called Compliance, in Hereditary. Like, she always plays someone that is just awful.
She's so good at it.
She's great at it. It's kind of alarming. I'm sure she's probably a very sweet person.
Sure. Yeah.
Most of the time, people who play those kind of parts are just uncommonly kind in real life.
Right.
But yeah, she is a powerhouse performer. The performers in general are good in this. I do feel like the first season kind of takes a little bit to get underway, to kind of find its footing. I will say the opening sequence that's
harrowing.
Yes, October 14th. It is the exact word I wrote down. I said it's the most harrowing and dreadful things ever. One of. I mean, it's just all the chaos, the disappearances. It's really that sort of kicks the door down.
There's so much groundwork I want to lay here, but that scene particularly. But what it made me think of immediately was, if you have a digital music service, Apple Music, Spotify, what have you, look up the scores, the Max Richter scores.
Oh, yes.
The company of this show, they are transcendent. I mean,
they really are. Yeah, they really are.
ethereal and beautiful, but specifically the first time I think they're deployed in this episode is the disappearance of Sam.
It's true.
The
Yes.
episode opens with the sudden disappearance or the sudden departure, and it's this woman on the phone in her car had just put her squalling sort of infant in the back seat. It stops crying off camera, and the camera pulls out, and it's gone. And that's how you start the show. So it starts at that spot. You do have Nora and Matt, siblings who you don't know out of the gate. I wasn't even thinking about this. You do know, I know you know this, but the connection between The Leftovers and Infinity War, right? Other than just the events of the show.
Oh, that Nora is, or that Carrie Coon?
Carrie Coon, yeah.
And that she is, gosh, what is that character's name, though? I always forget that character's name.
Character is, it's funny, I totally wrote it down for our Infinity War, and so there's Call Obsidian, there's Corvus Glaive, there is, what is that? Proxima Midnight is the name of her character.
Midnight.
That's some Infinity War.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Wrong thing. Leftovers. Here we go. I'll throw 2 notes on episode 1, and then we can move on to 2, as I know you might be ready.
Sure.
To.
Yeah.
Nora's speech at Heroes Day is, there are 2 moments I teared up in this rewatch. It was there that culminates. She tells these adjacent stories of terrible sickness that her whole family endured, as well as a day at the beach that was lovely. And she is noteworthy in this town. This character is noteworthy in this town because her husband and both her children, her whole family departed. But she ends this speech by saying, "I'm not greedy. I'm not asking for that perfect day at the beach. Just give me that horrible Saturday, all 4 of us sick and miserable, but alive and together."
Yeah, no kidding. And such a moment like that, particularly with echoes of, what's transpiring among us right now, the ways that you can wish for, the most mundane things. And again, we're not diving into deep waters in these portions, though it may come up in a little bit with our primary film. The only other big note that I took away from first episode was the sequence at the end where the gentleman whose name I have forgotten.
I don't think they ever give him one.
Do they not? Okay. When the dogs kill the deer, right, which is a terrible moment in and of itself, but then the man, culminating in the "they're not our dogs" line, which really is haunting just as a concept. They're not our dogs, not anymore. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from ironically from episode 1, which is largely scene setting. The opening sequence and the closing sequence are the most memorable elements to it for me. You ready to dive into episode 2?
Sure.
You good?
Let's do it.
So, good Lord, the first time in episode 2 when you see the title sequence, I love the title sequence with the music and with this.
Well, what's so funny about you saying that is
art.
Knowing where the series goes with its titles. I so love that so much that this was like,
that's right. They used to do
Let the Mystery Be. Yeah.
Yes. Let the Mystery Be is a better choice, particularly with what the show's trying to say. But I do love this season 1 opening title sequence. I'm gonna kick the door down on something right away because it's probably gonna come up multiple times as we move through season 1. I hate, and I know that's a strong word, but I feel I've watched 4 episodes. You've watched 4 episodes now. And this is our second time through it, but rewatching them, I hate the Holy Wayne plotline. Like I despise it. I didn't like it in the novel. I don't like it in the series. I think everybody.
It did give us Buddy Garrity back for at least a moment.
That is true. I did like seeing old Buddy Garrity. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. So but no, like, I think the performers are doing what they can with the material. I just hate the plot line. Like, I'm not against like any individual or what they're trying to do. It's just, it's just awful every time it comes up.
There are this episode presents 2 rich themes that and Wayne is part of one of those threads. I agree with you. I mean, it's not a chore, but it's definitely the least interesting thread. And the show, if it doesn't at the outset, knows that and learns that for
Right.
its future. But the two main sort of philosophy puzzle pieces that you get handed here that become keystone ideologies of the show, I'll tell the one, well, what doesn't matter. So the Guilty Remnant,
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
cult, in a new way, and maybe I just didn't remember it the first time, I love Laurie and Meg at the tree initially.
Sure.
And another thing I failed to mention with the Guilty Remnant is because they don't speak, they write everything down.
Yes.
Meg Abbott, who is played by Liv Tyler of The Strangers, and various other things, but for our purposes, The Strangers, is being put through this rite of passage to be part of the Guilty Remnant. And
Yes.
she references them as a cult. And Laurie, Kevin's estranged wife, writes, not a cult. And I'm paraphrasing some of this. Meg says, I'm not doing this. Laurie says, why? She says, I don't want to. Laurie says, why? Meg says, it's all so stupid, okay? And Laurie says, okay. And that is the Guilty Remnant ideology.
Yeah.
On a certain level, it's all
Sure.
stupid.
Yeah.
These attachments, the things we're holding on to, this recurring theme of remember is it's really interesting. And I hope you and I get to this, as I trust we probably will. The Guilty Remnant are sort of fascinating. It's one scene to the next. It's kind of hard for me their intention is elusive. Like their meaning, their ideology is a bit elusive, but at the same time, when it is clear to me, there are moments where I'm like, I kind of totally get what they're doing. Like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, taking a moment, the amount, because we're comparing cults. Here we have, I just railed against the Holy Wayne stuff. The Guilty Remnant, which is cultish in its dynamic, is legions more interesting to me.
Sure.
I mean, they and in the novel the same way, that just this idea of we refuse to be normal. And I like you don't have like a defined, I don't think the show ever like lays out a mission statement for the Guilty Remnant, but what their ultimate aim is does feel a bit more elusive, but I do find their approach compelling, as awful as some of the things are that they eventually do. Yeah.
Well, can I throw at you? I do
Sure.
think they posit. I'm simply saying sometimes one moment to the next, it's hard for me to keep this in view. In the first episode, there are placards and sort of imagery throughout the Guilty Remnant's cult house that says, we are living reminders. And then reference to the smoking. We don't smoke for enjoyment, but to proclaim our faith. And I think largely, I think the Guilty Remnant is saying, we remember. In other words, and this is where the Guilty Remnant become interesting talking points for the cultural moment we're in. They are here to say, you guys are trying to move on. There's nothing to move on into. Yes. It is all so stupid. It's stupid. We remember. And so smoking, killing ourselves is our religion.
Yes, right.
So there is that. Yes, there's that cult aspect. The other cult aspect that I think, or rather the other ideological aspect, and then I can be done, that I think is going to echo through for ourselves, for the show. I'm with you. Little though I like Wayne, there's an interesting juxtaposition of scenes. Late in this episode, Wayne says to Tom, when he's offering his holy hug, right?
Yeah, right.
He says, you don't have to feel like this anymore. And then minutes later, Meg to Laurie says, I don't want to feel this way anymore.
Ah, interesting.
And it's just this interesting sort of wrestling with our attachments and, the things we love and why we love them, the things we hate and why we hate them. I don't know. It's just a really interesting conversation those two ideologies are having.
I can appreciate that. I can. My last note, as obvious as it is, I do love the bagel metaphor, but skipping right past that, I wanted to just mention, because this is his first appearance, that I find Scott Glenn's character, he's wonderful as a character, and this is my favorite performance I've ever seen Scott Glenn give. He's excellent.
Not as Stick and Daredevil? Come on.
I do like him in Daredevil.
I
But no, I mean, yeah, he's really remarkable in this, and I really he goes to some fascinating places as the show progresses, and so I just wanted to give him a shout out since this was his first appearance was in episode 2. But that's all the notes I have on it thus far.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen of Mapleton, we end our Heroes Day anniversary celebration of those who have departed. Join us next week for episodes 3 and 4 of season 1 of The Leftovers, where we meet in more full version the one and only Matt Jameson. Perhaps our favorite character of the whole show, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll see you next time on TV Guideposts. Oh man.
Oh man, it's so
There's
weird
a
to do
lot
that by
happening
video.
right now, Reed. There's a
It's
lot
so
happening.
weird. It's so
Like,
weird.
in life, in art, in us.
It's true. It's true.
Everybody.
Oh, speaking of which, can we? Okay, so
Can we?
I'd like to take a moment as we get into
Right there, I'll tell you how I became the principal town call
so our subject film today is David Lowery's A Ghost Story. This was a film that I have said more than once, not terribly frequently, but I've said more than once that my favorite variety of horror story is ghost stories. And that's true, excepting that I do love a good horror comedy. That gives it a run for its money. But in terms of types of horror stories, I love ghost stories. And so when I saw a film from a director that I admire and respect and have enjoyed his work called A Ghost Story, I was like, oh, great. I'm going to check this out.
me.
I can't wait. And so I watched this in proximity to, I didn't go see it in the theater, but I watched this in proximity to its release, like pretty much the first moment that it was available to stream. I watched it and I was stunned by what I saw. And immediately following it, I don't think I texted you. I don't think I told you anything about it, but I went to a little list that we've got.
You wrote it down real small,
and I tucked it into the wall.
And you just tucked it into
like,
somewhere. And somewhere to find and scratch at.
Okay. My little, it's gone off the rails now. Careening.
Yeah.
So I added this film to the list that was like, someday we're going to talk about this film, but I'm not going to tell Nathan about this right now. I'm not going to urge him to go and check out this film or anything. We're going to talk about this film at some point. So then, talking about this series of The Leftovers, and we knew that this first wave, these first sort of cycle of films, were all going to be about ghost stories, hauntings, things about,
remnant.
A remnant, if you will. Yes. Something that lingers after there has been a profound loss, disappearance, if you will. And so I knew, I was like, man, I'm gonna pitch that we open with A Ghost Story. And I think that's all I told you about it. And so I'm going to pivot over to you in a minute, because then one evening when I found out that you were watching it, and then I realized what you were thinking about it, it just delighted my heart.
Well,
in ways I didn't know was possible.
Yeah. Even from this far apart.
No, it's true.
So yeah, what's really hysterical about that is I asked you a question pertinent to next week's film, because I was queuing up to watch that, and then you didn't answer me in a timely fashion, or the Lord orchestrated such that you would not answer me in a timely fashion. And so I was like,
true.
Screw it, I'm going to go to Netflix and watch A Ghost Story. And next week we're covering the film The Changeling, and you'll get to hear our thoughts on that. I knew Reed liked The Changeling, but he had been noticeably quiet regarding A Ghost Story, not in a way that registered for me as anything other than just subconscious. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, The Changeling and A Ghost Story. Okay, I know Reed likes The Changeling. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go watch A Ghost Story. This is the lead off. Okay, what? And I knew about the film. I knew it existed.
Right.
I'd seen the cover art. I have a friend locally who, when it was out initially, kind of raved about it, but I didn't know any of it. I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay.
You can kind of suss out pretty easily. Oh, a ghost story. The image is a ghost figure. Okay, that's what
Right.
we're looking at. But how it does what it does, I had no clue. And I'm always a sucker for just like something a little canted, right? Something a little off
Sure.
a few degrees. And so it opens up, and the aspect ratio is
Right.
more akin to like an old home
Pan and
video
scan.
reel.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's a little cute and inventive. And to my knowledge, and I do think I went back and looked, and I still think I don't know that I've seen any David Lowery stuff. So I didn't have anything to pull
Interesting.
from.
Okay. Sure.
And at like the 30-minute mark, I was like, this is pretty cool. And it was we'll get to it, but so the pie scene happens, and you're like, no, it is before the pie scene. Is the morgue scene before the pie scene? I can't remember now.
The morgue scene is definitely before the pie scene.
Okay.
Yes.
Then
yes,
it's the
yes,
morgue
yes.
scene. So the morgue scene happens, and I was like, this shot just keeps going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
Is anybody else saying it? This shot is still going. And it's just all of a sudden, what was interesting became like fascinating and kind of like, okay, you're kind of doing something cool here. Well, and of course, so okay, I'm trying to jump into the film.
Yeah.
Because I'm excited, but I want to establish where I think you're wanting me to land. So I get totally swept up in it. I mean, I may as well have been up under that sheet with that guy. I was like, I am here for this.
Yes, sure.
Certain moments happen. The morgue, seeing another ghost. I was like, oh my God.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So I won't steal all that thunder, but I texted you about halfway through, and I used an expletive, but I did it syllabically, right?
Yes.
It was just like one syllable at a time. I blank love this, and you're hilarious. You're like, It was this real like coy, will he, won't he? It was like, are you sure? Yeah,
for real?
Are you playing with me? And I was like, no, I'm dead serious. And I've got it pulled up what I wrote at the end, and then we can jump into your response to my response.
Sure, yeah.
Movie. At the end of this movie, you guys, and I get excited about movies when I love them and like them. I had such this weird confluence of emotions happen at the end that what I texted Reed was, after it was over and I was sitting there just in delight, I said, I want to stand and clap and cry and dance. What in the world?
Yes.
Like, Reed, since this movie, I've already recommended it to a few people. I've tried to pull a you with my wife and be like, I did. I was great. Like, I'm not going to tell her much. Like, I really would love if you want to watch this, but I got to be careful because I'm going to be like in my way, like, oh my God, like it changed my heart. I am now a believer in ghosts, like whatever. But you can't do that because then she's going to come expecting like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I can't use the word Terrence Malick because she doesn't like Terrence Malick. And so I want it because part of me is like, it's like Malick, but refined. It's like a bit more, I don't know. So let's talk about A Ghost Story because I loved it.
Oh my gosh, it's such a great movie. What's amazing is that, like, I mean, it's incredibly highly praised. This is just such a special film. And I'm going to struggle because any of our typical segments, any of what we normally would talk about, it is possible to spend like a mountain of time on any one of them. But this is a truly unique, it's very personal. It's something that David Lowery
It was written by a ghost.
It's a documentary. This is something that David Lowery has even said is was a creative means to process things he was struggling with. One of the biggest things being he and his wife, I believe it was his wife. I can't remember if it was his wife or
so.
if they were not married at the time, but they were having a discussion about whether or not they wanted to relocate. And he was wrestling with his attachment to place and sense of space. And there was that, also more existential crises, and just all of these sort of pieces culminating together in one of the most patient, haunting, frightening, lovely,
I've been listening to the
inspiring.
score like over and over.
It's that score.
Amazing.
Oh,
It's so
my
good.
gosh, that score.
Well, and to your point about the genesis of it, what I read too is that much of the dialogue between Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck are actually, it's like these are the things they said to each other, just
Yes.
in script form.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to watch. So when 15 minutes in, Affleck's dead in the front yard, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I have
here's that.
Let me get a couple of trivial bits out of the way, because I wanted to like dive in. So there's a couple of cool things that I thought was cool. One of my favorite aspects of this film is the actual shape of the ghost, and I love that it looks very simple, but that is reported was one of the most challenging aspects, because when regular sheets lay over adult people, like, the appearance isn't,
it's just kind of limp.
Yes, it's not that iconic sort of rounded shape. So in order to achieve that, like, Casey Affleck had to wear like a hoop and several petticoats, and there was this very sort of deliberate intention. They even had to do, although I'm not sure what this looked like, but they even had to do a sort of puppeteering to keep the eyes in place where they were supposed to be. So there was a lot of challenges in just creating what appears to be like the simplest aspect of the film. Oh, just throw a sheet over Casey Affleck. The other thing that I love about this film is it was filmed in secret. So it was funded largely by what David Lowery made off of Pete's Dragon, which was, a big Disney live action piece. And so naturally he probably got a decent sized payday from that. It was not announced as a project until after post-production was almost complete. Like, they didn't even announce it was coming or it was happening until they were almost done with it. And then two more things that I love. So the big pie scene, obviously it's obvious from the film that it's done in one take, because it's just one continuous, almost still shot. And it says that the specific pie was vegan chocolate, and Rooney Mara said it was terrible, but David Lowery said it was delicious. The last note that I have in terms of like trivia stuff, you mentioned that neighbor ghost thing, and I'm kind of flying through these because then I want to just get into moments in the film. The neighbor ghost was played by David Lowery, the one
I did see that. Yeah.
Yes. So that's cool. Wanted to get a couple trivia things out of the way. Let's talk about the movie.
Let's talk about food. So
okay.
Much like the morgue scene, when girl starts eating that pie,
mm-hmm.
I was like, that may as well be me right now in quarantine. Like that, like 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
I mean, I've kind of normalized, but like that I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna open a thing and I'm gonna stay in here and eat all of it. And then I just move on to the other thing and eat all of that. And my wife, huh?
Oh, I was just gonna say, and for what listeners don't know, like this is, if you have not seen it, she opens the pie.
She's just come from her husband's wake or funeral or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a pie there.
And she opens the pie and begins to eat the pie, and it is a 4-minute stationary shot of her just sitting there eating this pie, and it goes on for so long.
There is one cut. They're like, it's straight on of her standing, and then it cuts to her sitting. Yeah. Nonetheless.
Yes. But still, yes. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
She eats an entire pie,
all of it.
So yeah, it was this just weird, like, yeah, I feel you, girl. Like that's me. I could do that with ease. So I got up and ate everything in the cupboard. No. So question for you, Reed, like if you were out of stress and anxiety and fear to just devour an entire thing in its in its entirety. Like what
Mhm.
would that thing be?
Oh, an entire bag of chips and however much salsa was there. That's all. That's it.
That's gonna hurt later. But
Hashtag worth it.
Hashtag is it? Mine would probably
Hashtag
be
hell yeah.
mine would probably be a jar of peanut butter. I would just
Oh.
just go, you know.
Oh my gosh. My son one time cracked open a jar of peanut butter, ate like half the jar before my wife could get to him. He ate like half the jar. He made himself so sick. Oh man. Anyway.
Yeah. So once the morgue scene happens and you know, you learn there's going to be a physical ghost embodying physical space in this
Yes.
sort of world versus like, okay, we're going to cut from the morgue scene and now we're going to have just the visualization of it, which is
Right.
not what they do. So then there's that. Then there's the foods, the pie scene. Like, okay, this is something kind of cool. I think it's around there that I might have texted you, and I think you were like, "No, are you just playing with me?"
Oh, right. It was about the 1 hour mark is when I think we connected.
I don't know why, but the scenes, not just that the film is smart enough to show us another ghost, not just that they engage each other, not just that they communicate such rich text with so little verbiage. Something in that first revelation, like kind of like I almost envision an egg that is my heart, and it just kind of cracks open, everything in it just kind of spills out. And I was just like, I don't know how to process this emotionally.
Right.
And
that's where,
yeah,
that's the moment where you know our ghost is Casey Affleck. He looks across, sees
I called
neighbor
him
ghost.
Ghosty. Yeah, there's
Ghosty.
Ghosty and neighbor ghost. Yeah,
Ghosty and neighbor ghost. So Ghosty, he's credited just as C. That's all he's credited as.
well, we're gonna call him Ghosty. He's a name.
Ghosty. So Ghosty looks across, sees neighbor ghost, and then neighbor ghost says, "I'm waiting for someone," and he says, "Who?" And by the way, when we say "says," it's all
it's just
text.
subtitles.
Yeah,
text
subtitles
words
on the screen. No audible dialogue. He says, "Who?" And then the ghost like turns away and says, "I don't remember." I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, oh man. And for people who have not seen this film, the film is very meditative. Like one of my biggest loves is I just love this film's patience. Like it lingers on moments that other films would be anxious to cut away from. The first time you see it is actually not even the morgue scene, but is the scene when they're laying in bed together. They've kissed a little bit, but then it lingers much longer than other films would have lingered. And they're not doing anything. It's not a, you know, it's not meant to be, you know, that variety of scene. It's meant to just be
it's
moment,
intimate but not sexual, right?
Exactly. Right. That's a perfect description. It's just them holding each other as they both, you know, conceivably have drifted off to sleep as they're doing that. And it's remarkable. Just, and the film is staged very much like that, with just brave patience that I come to really appreciate.
So that when it does turn the dial up later, I mean, I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
What
you're talking about?
Oh my god,
when he starts throwing, when he starts what?
Angry ghost.
Oh yes, when he starts angry ghosty.
Yeah,
when he starts manifesting and like cracking open cabinets and throwing pie plates at everywhere, and it's just, oh man, yes.
A scene that yeah, to affirm and back you up, and yes, amen you, the sparse yet profound text scripting between the ghosts is just wrenching. I love just the imagery of the time passing at the house. There is one scene right after it manifests when it is just, there's a montage of just it in different rooms, kind of observing. That's really lovely.
Yes.
What do you want to talk about? There's so much.
So okay, so man, it's there's
because I did categorize. I held off on Mad Ghosty because I do have it under scares. I mean, we can talk about that a bit more.
understood. No, understood. I mean, given the nature of this film, gosh, let's just go wherever.
Okay.
I mean, I have a couple of things, but just I would say in this particular conversation, just when something substantive strikes us, let's not delay it.
Well, it's. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
thought you were
No,
being
no.
like, go for it.
No, do yeah, by all means.
I don't know that I want to dwell here long, but the giving it intention and conscious choice was a fascinating sort of choice on the part of the production. You know, like it's most directly exhibited through Angry Ghost. I just did not see that coming because the film is so paced and
yes,
meditative, as you said, and patient that so if you go watch this movie, like there's no
yes, oh yeah,
sort of sugarcoating that, but like remind me, is it purely just the anger? There's not a thing, right? It's the new family, the Spanish family is in the home, and it's just more like a expression of just distress more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that whole sequence, I'm looking at my scares list. When Ghost is at fridge and light comes on behind.
Yeah. Well, and also when the kid sees him, like in the shadows off in the distance. Yeah.
Well,
it was like
that's the closet. The closet opens, and we, the viewer, are shown an empty closet. It cuts to the little boy and cuts back, and he's seeing Ghosty.
Yes.
That was powerful.
Oh man. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that, like, for a film called A Ghost Story, it is more appropriate to describe the film as haunting rather than scary. But that sequence with that family is scary. Like,
but you say that, and I totally agree with the sentiment, but it also is a signal that Lowery knows what he has and knows the conventions he's working with, because there are legitimate jump moments. Like, I've got right here when the bulldozer comes through the window. That scared the crap out of me.
Yes, where and Lowery is so great because it's a moment where the ghost is trying to pull, and he's been scratching at for a long time to try to get that paper. The root of the film, my gosh, we're going all over the place. The root of the film is,
it's like a ghost. We're just bouncing around time.
Yeah. Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara are in a relationship. Don't know if they're married. Don't know if they're boyfriend, girlfriend. We're going to assume they're married for the course of the conversation. The film never addresses it. So they're intimate together. They live together. He dies in a car accident and then becomes a ghost. Literally, she comes, identifies his body, and then he's on the slab, and then rises up after a very long time, a very long shot, rises up and begins to navigate the film under the shroud of this sheet. And what happens is he goes back to his house. He witnesses her in the sort of aftermath of it. Eventually, she leaves, but before she leaves, she tucks this note into a crevice of the wall in the place. And that moment you just described with the bulldozer, the ghost has been sort of scratching at that place in the wall to try to get purchase on that paper, and he almost has it free when suddenly that bulldozer just comes plowing literally through the roof, and it is alarming and frightening. And then that whole demolishing of the house culminates in one of the film's most gut-wrenching moments to me, because we've already addressed Ghosty looks across the way at the house that the other one sees Neighbor Ghost, and we know Neighbor Ghost is waiting for someone. When that house is demolished and then Ghosty is standing there looking across the way at Neighbor Ghost, they're both, picture these two individuals in shrouds and looking at each other, and then suddenly Neighbor Ghost looks over, and just in one flash you see the subtitles across the screen. It says, "I don't think they're coming." And the moment "I don't think they're coming" comes up on the screen, the sheet deflates, and Neighbor Ghost has presumably like evaporated. And is just gone. What? Disapparated, yes.
Yeah.
And so then the film progresses as as our main ghostie sort of travels through time, going into the far distant future, and then remarkably going all the way back to experiencing, like, presumably the building of the first version of that house. It's just, man,
Well, it's funny you
there's
said that
so
because
much.
it didn't register for me, and then I just presumed based on the O Pioneers sequence that
Right.
this is what
Yes.
happened. It didn't click with me that it was meant to be a futuristic setting. Like
Mm, mm.
it, I do think, I think that Ghosty never leaves the place he's at, the physical
Right.
geographical space, right? More or
Mhm.
less. That the skyscraper sequence ultimately is all a future.
That's what I interpreted it as. So my interpretation of the film is that, yes, when he leaves the hospital and goes back, he is always in that place. So
Right.
what he experiences of walking through the boardroom and everything like that is eventually what became of that place, and that
Right.
he's in that physical space. That's the way I interpreted it, is that he is always tied and locked into that plot of land, if you will,
Well,
and whatever else happens on it.
and so you are observing, even ignoring the extremes of far-flung future and distant past, you're observing Ghosty's experience as the house has changed hands ultimately to its demolition. Did you know that Kesha is one of the partygoers
I had read that. Yeah.
that
Yeah. I didn't
Lowery
recognize which
wanted?
one.
Well, I mean, truthfully, I'm not even sure I'd recognize her if I saw
Hmm.
her, but like she was invited to do a song, to write a song for it. Maybe she did. I can't remember, but the score I've been listening to is the music, not ancillary stuff. But she came and joined the cast for that.
Yeah. Just for that one scene.
Yeah, but good Lord, how do you even wrangle this? Other than to be like, piss off, Ghost. Speaking of MCU, um, it is worth mentioning in that intimate scene you referenced what jars them. Or no, this is the intimate scene is after this happens.
Yes.
There's a piano, key clang that happens in the house, and they go to explore, and of course there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But once the film starts the time travel sort of procession, I was like, it's him, it's Ghosty. And on a certain level, I don't know exactly, and I didn't do enough research to know what the film is trying to posit through kind of what is easily referenced as the time travel thing, because a key component at the end is can we open this door?
Do it, please. Yes.
So
Yes.
you almost get this, not almost, you get this cycle where house gets demolished, future sequence happens, Ghosty jumps or steps off a giant skyscraper. The next moment is in Pioneer days, where ostensibly this family is building what will become or starting to build what will become this home over time. There's this really beautifully crafted but haunting image of the dead girl's body as it has progressed over time.
Yeah.
And then you've got Ghosty back in the house. And one of the most interesting choices that I don't know what to do with in this moment, made from a story standpoint, is because we've seen Angry Ghosty, so we know what it's capable of. We know that level of expression is part of its design, part of its kind of expression. So once the awareness of the piano bang is upon you, what you instead get is not some sort of attention seeking clang.
Right.
It is Ghosty back in this setting and slumps into the piano stool. And honestly, there's no intention towards the keys. It just is part of the slump.
Yes.
And so that was just a really fascinating choice to me.
Almost in defeated resignation more than anything else. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we go to the end and then start
Yes.
unpacking?
I do want to say,
Please.
well, and this might pivot us into, I don't know if this is what you were asking when you said you weren't quite sure of the kind of the intention with the time travel thing. Let me see. I believe I wrote this aspect down. Okay, I'm going to read the note as I wrote it, and then we can unpack it further if we need to. So the concept that we are being watched by our own ghosts was a deeply affecting metaphor for me. As I saw it in this film, it haunted me. It filled me with this deep kind of ache that remains oddly powerful and strangely comforting in a way, because in a sense, we all do watch ourselves in our pasts, in our memories, our regrets, our joys. We're powerless to change those things, but we can't do anything but observe them. And so in the final moment of the film, and what happens in the final moment of the film is he finally, after this entire journey through time and space, he does excise the note. He opens it up, and the moment he reads it, he, as the neighbor ghost did before him, just the sheet collapses and he falls away into nothingness, into whatever is after that. So he opens the note, reads it, and fades away. And then cut to black. Credits begin to roll. Like that is the ending of the film. And it lingered with me so long. This idea of a ghost who has no power but to observe. I mean, has the power, as we see through the scene with the Spanish speaking family, like has the power to at least sort of exert some type of force, some type of expression, but really not to change or influence anything over that past sequence, because in Lost Cadence, whatever happened. But it really got me thinking about the ways in which I look back at my 30-year-old self, 20-year-old self, teen, and it is in a sense like I am being, in that moment, I'm being watched by my own ghost, or the ghost of myself. It's, again, I may not be encapsulating it right, but it was a really powerful
Well,
metaphor for me.
one one film note you left out there that feels relevant is when Ghosty Prime extracts this note, which is concurrent chronologically with the couple still in the home.
Yes.
One, we are not privy to what is on the note,
No,
which
it
is
never
an
shows us.
amazing choice and
Yes,
just
agreed.
brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I guess I would assume this is subconscious to you, if not conscious at this point. It also illustrates why Ghosty we've watched can't extract the note, because it's already
Correct.
gone.
Yes,
Which is
exactly.
wild to even
Right,
ponder. It's
right.
like a time heist. It's like you go back to get the gems, you got to place them right back where they were.
Yeah, right.
The phrase I wrote down, and I time has just not allowed me to ponder this too deeply, and maybe that's what this moment is for both of us, is like you brushed up against it, but the Casey Affleck, when he wanders out, so it reiterates the scene of him pursuing the noise, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a real funny anecdote worth throwing out here, but I won't too deeply, about on my honeymoon at our stay, the place we're staying at, we heard a noise and I grabbed a ceramic giraffe and wandered out into the dark of the world of the place. And now I'm wondering, was my ghost present with me? But he wanders out into the home, finds nothing there. There's a cut in there of her saying, why do you want to stay here so much? And he says, we have history.
Yeah.
And dadgummit, I totally meant to earlier I'm not going to unpack here, and if we can come back to it if we want. But the music scene when she's listening to the music is maybe one of the most riveting moments.
Oh, yes.
It's amazing.
Yes,
it is
yes,
amazing
absolutely.
and beautiful. It reminded me a lot of Girl Walks Home Alone at Night music scene.
Yeah, sure.
So being asked why he wants to stay late in the film, he says, "We have history." And so then you learn these iterations of his spiritual self are occupying the same space with him. And the phrase I wrote down, which I'm building to here, is that even ourselves know ourselves. And, you know, so much of my, as you definitively know, and our listeners mainly know, but so much of my feelings and thoughts and sort of spiritual understanding of the last 18 months plus have been informed by a lot of Richard Rohr's teachings, and this embedded in a lot of it is a rupturing from what so much of my early faith life felt like I received as there is God and there is you. And these are two entirely disparate, different, alien things to each other.
Yeah.
On a certain level, perhaps there's still some truth to that. But what I am growing into a feeling of and ideally an embodying of is that the materiality of us is on a certain level godness as well. And there's something so powerful. What I wrote down too is the meditation, that the film's a meditation on presence, presence.
Yes, right.
We are the traditionally understood American churched body are so directed to otherness that we ignore rootedness in presence. That we have no presence. I just stumbled into that. Like, we have no presence. We have no materiality. We have no,
right.
I got into this dumb conversation on Facebook today, which I do actively try to avoid. But it was like, because I made some comment about political realities and sort of trying to be knowledgeable and active in those realities. And this person was like, "Oh, well, the church is that those things are meant for the church. Like, these social problems are meant for the church." And I was like, "Nah, that doesn't work anymore for me. For me, Nathan, doesn't work anymore for me." And is exemplary, at least, of this absence of presence. We don't know ourselves don't know ourselves. And if ourself doesn't know ourself, which is, I understand, wild language, does God know us? Can God know us if we are unwilling to be present and rooted? I don't know. I'm just throwing some ideas on the table here, because I do think there's an interesting conversation. Real quick, I do think there's an interesting conversation the movie has about progressing. I don't think she is cast as incorrect in desiring a new, right? Like, there's this kind of tension in the film between the two of them. He wants to stay put, she wants to move on geographically, and so I'm not ignoring that. But I also think if this idea of ourselves knowing ourselves, it's this deep calling to deep idea, that we have neglected the tactile in favor of the ephemeral, to me. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, immediately two scriptures came to mind, and obviously they're in different contexts in those places, but this feels like it keeps happening more and more, is that we'll bring up a subject or we'll bring up an observation, and then scripture will echo through it. But the first scripture that came to mind is of course in the parable and teaching that Jesus gave. There were certain people to which the Lord said, "Depart from me, I never knew you." and that's the language that's known, and that's the language that's used. There's also the observation that in the end we will be known as we are known, which is very sort of,
Yeah.
again, it's
A
language that is
folding in on itself.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you're scratching at anything wildly combative with the substance of what we should be considering about. And I just love wrestle with the phrasing of the absence of presence.
Mm-hmm.
Wrestle with that, like the old Paul Simon fan in me and The Sound of Silence and all that kind of stuff sort of, wakens up. But just what a powerful concept of just, you're not here.
Mm-hmm.
You're not known.
Yes.
You're not, and it's not just about engagement. It's it's a specter. It's missing. It's I think that a lot of times, because we don't frequently meditate on these kinds of things, but I can remember
you and I, or just general we?
General we at the moment,
Yeah.
but I can remember when I went to North Carolina last with my family, the last time that my whole family was there with my mom and dad. And I can remember, I believe I mentioned this on an episode when this was more proximal to its happening, but I can't remember which episode that was. But I talked about, we visited a place where I used to attend these little camps when I was a kid. And as we were driving up the driveway, I very distinctly had, I mean, it wasn't this weird hallucinogenic thing, but emotionally speaking, it was as real as I am describing. I drove up that long driveway and I felt like my 10-year-old self came running around the corner to greet me. And it was the weirdest.
As told on our
thing.
episode covering the movie Mother back from
January, was that
2017? Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, see, you have a memory when you want to have.
2018. Well, it's also because I've been combing through our material lately.
So, but that idea of the ties we have to space and the ties we have to a particular place, a place where things happened, and a place where something significant changed or shifted in us. And I can understand, even though I wouldn't begin to be able to explain it, I can connect to this sense that Casey Affleck has about history. And I think it's important that the moment we receive that line of dialogue from the film, he's being watched after his future self has gone through all of these other things. So he's talking about history, and it could easily be conceived that he's talking about forward history and backward history, all looped into itself. One of the concepts that I have spoken to in varying degrees is this idea of God and of ourselves when we are with God after we leave this present space, of just the absence of temporal rules. We are out of time, like outside of.
I'm sorry, restate that. You're saying like when we die? Is that what you're saying? Or
yes,
saying,
when we are eventually with God, that we die, we are outside of the boundaries of time, and that God himself as a being would be by nature unbound by the rules of time. So time itself would be as irrelevant as all things happening simultaneously, all things happening linearly, all things backwards, forwards, up, down, everything. And so that concept is really powerful to me in this sense of when we think about the journey of the soul and the currency of, not currency as in like money or exchange, but just the currentness of the soul, and where the soul eventually goes and where the soul has been before, and all of those kinds of concepts about what encapsulates us as people. I think it demands a lot of us to recognize that materiality is in many ways, it's weird because I want to simultaneously express that in many ways it is just the shell, but at the same time it is incarnational, as we've talked about so many times on the show, that it is
There's-
far more
yeah.
than just the husk. And
The
and so-
shell
and
the shell is materialism.
yes.
The incarnation is materiality. It's funny you use that word.
Yeah,
I did just read a book. I would encourage anyone. It's actually pretty short, but it's Walter Brueggemann's Materiality as Resistance. He talks about 5 real specific things: time, food, money, something, and place. But place is one of them. And I was trying to even find some notes, but it's not worth digging in. It's funny you phrase it that way, the materiality of things. And Rohr talks about the true self and the false self, similar sort of ideas. And I'm watching our time, and we're actually a little ahead of the curve, so we can talk a little longer here. Is something that I've been thinking about lately, and it's weird how all these things are overlapping. The word that came to me when you were describing the Casey moment with his ghost was nexus, like this nexus.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
All of the things are interacting at one moment. Recently, because of quarantine and just sort of stress and a lot of anxiety on the front end, I went listening to some late 90s CCM. And sort of out of solidarity for my 40-year-old self, I specifically went to Jennifer Knapp and Kansas. And that's a great album. But that, coupled with several others I listened on a similar on the same drive, I started pondering the notion of the question became, why is this impacting me? And I started wrestling with internally, and it's all kind of coalescing in this moment, and ourselves, knowing ourselves, and materiality as incarnation, and and presence as godness. The difference between pure and only nostalgia stoking, and actual presentness, meaning. I won't deny that listening to some of those old albums was heartening to me, but as I interrogated that, there's a lot of, in some of the albums I was listening to, some theological stuff that I'd be like, I wouldn't really buy in on that. So why am I listening to this? It's because it reminds me and makes me feel like time, like of when I thought, quote unquote, it was easier. It was easier. It was 20 years ago. It was, the world was all out in front of you. The responsibilities of adulthood and parenthood and all this sort of stuff were not the weights that they feel like so much sometimes. Yeah. But I kept interrogating that. Like, okay, well, then what? So if there's no more truth to this, to what I'm listening to right now, it's not about its truthfulness. It's about what it's making me feel. And what it's making me feel is fine, but that isn't God. That's just reminder, right? I'm living back then when it was easier, when life was easier. I didn't have to wrestle with the me I am, the husband I am, the father I am, the world we're in. I didn't have to wrestle with any of that. Yeah. So all I was doing was stoking nostalgia. So then what? So what is it? Why? I won't travel this too hard, but it just came to me. Why do we want to make America great again? Because it makes us feel like we did when we were dominant and on top and fully emboldened by our privilege. That's it. That's all it is. Versus, but what now? There are 2 right now major headlines about 2, are they cops? I don't even friggin' know. Father and son who murdered a black man. Like, I don't mean to travel this path too hard, but the point I'm simply trying to make is we have so neglected immediacy and presence that we are dead. We're dead. We are dying. We are husks. We are materialistic. We are pure material, not materiality. So what is the difference? And how do you do that? You do that. I don't want to be quarantined necessarily, but you know what I've gotten out of it? I've gotten like playing with my 3-year-old and being like, you know what? I don't care about any of work and money and whatever. Those things have a place, and I'm not denying that. But like, of course, what I've been able to do is like dial in and be like, yeah, I'll let you run at me for the 100th time in a row and knock me over, 3-year-old, because materiality and presence demands, and the nexus, all of those things are intersecting, and godness is here.
Yeah.
Right? It
Yeah.
is
Oh,
it
yeah.
is my inmost self planted in me by the eminent benevolence, knowing myself in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, one of the real challenges comes in when, for me, what you're saying is sparked in me is, there were two conversations that happened, and I say with no intention to be joking whatsoever that the days really are bleeding together. When I
Sure.
try to remember when a thing took place, I can't remember if it was a week ago, 2 days ago, yesterday, whatever. I don't remember the proximity of these things, but I remember there was one moment where I was having a conversation with my wife, and the substance of the conversation was just revolving around how much we hold back because we don't want to fall apart. Like you're wrestling with a lot of things, but you don't want to release them and verbalize them, because then it's like the dam breaks open and you would probably be okay letting like a stream out, but there's an ocean waiting behind it that's going
Sure.
to come. This is going to come pouring out. And in a similar way, there was a moment, in the same way my wife and I are going through our own little journeys. My 8-year-old son is going through a journey of his own, one that is profoundly a mystery to us and him, even though we ourselves as adults would express our own journeys as mysterious and difficult to maintain grasp. How much more so a child trying to navigate all of the confusion and all of the frustration. And I can't even remember how this conversation took place, but it was birthed from a moment of frustration where he was presenting some challenges, and it was related to like completing some schoolwork and something. And because I don't remember it, and because it's not really worth it, it's not worth doing a play-by-play of how we got there. But at some point in the conversation, I'm being stern with him, and my wife is also sort of backing me up. It's just the same thing that every parent has to have a conversation with. But suddenly, he it wasn't terribly dramatic, but he fell apart a little bit, and stated that so many things were just hard right now, and it was difficult to hear my son say that in just that plain way. Like,
Sure.
he said, life is hard right now. And to hear an 8-year-old tell you that will rattle your cage a little bit. I don't care how smart your 8-year-old is. And mine is. Mine's pretty smart. But it's still arresting to hear that phrase be expressed so succinctly and through tears. And it pivots the whole thing onto its head. And you start thinking about exactly what you're talking about perspective, and how you can wrestle with a moment in which you find both. And I'm bring it back to Ghost Story in a minute, but my job is really stressful right now, and to have to sit in a moment where I am immensely grateful to have it and also at my wit's end with it is weird. It's really, really weird to be torn between those two places and those two mindsets, and to be simultaneously grateful and afraid, or simultaneously grateful and confused, simultaneously hopeful and concerned, and just all of the different ways in which all of these potential futures kind of come pouring in and try to squeeze into one specific place, one specific time, one specific way. And what you're describing is taking a beat, just taking a step back and saying, I'm going to be present with my 3-year-old. I'm going to, in this moment, all the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. And this is the important part to me. I don't have to remember, and I don't have to understand everything. In this moment, I'm here. I'm really and truly with them. Like,
Right.
in that moment, and this is my final word on that statement. when my son expressed what he did, my goal of getting him to finish that thing of his schoolwork, or my goal in even communicating a message to him, everything was immediately second place and lower. Everything. And suddenly it's just
affirm and add to this, and
Yeah.
this is all tied together because Infinity War is, I'm gonna reference that too here. So your son in that moment was God coming to you disguised as your life, and it was him in himself knowing himself. And we talked last Friday on Infinity War about the 5 essential messages of initiation, which is what we are at least trying and verbalizing that we might be going through. The very first one is life is hard. And the only path to presence and rootedness and the capacity to live materially is acknowledging those 5 things we referenced on Infinity War. Life is hard. The reason I can play with my 3-year-old in that way, in that moment, is life is hard. I am not that important. My life is not about me. I'm not in control, and I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And that knowledge liberates to say, I can be here right now because I'm not in control.
Yeah.
I'll die one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe 50 years from now. My life's not about me. Right now, it's about you.
Yeah.
I'm not that important. Life is hard. So we but the problem, and what nostalgia does for us, as Watchmen taught us, and I'm sort of learning writ large, and what we as a culture are trying to do is nostalgia over all of those truths.
Right.
We're trying to take a feeling that once happened for certain people and say, we can do that and ignore all these things. And I'm not trying to explode this back up, but I am trying to just say, like, my peer online who's like, the church should be about the social issues. No, you're ignoring your responsibility. Your son in the moment saying, Dad, life is hard. This is hard. It's his moment of sobriety, like we don't want our kids to have to learn those truths too early, but I know your son, and he's a wonderful, bright kid. And like, that's bright people learn tough stuff quicker than dumb ones. And the ability to, like Affleck's character late, to say, we have history, like this space, this place, this moment, there's something material about it, and that's not that might be as much God as what we've been conditioned to think God is for the other aspects of our life that no longer feel like good anchors,
Right. Whoo. We haven't even, and we don't have to for long, but I don't want to end the episode without mentioning him. That party-going philosopher, and the extent, I can't repeat it. I didn't write it down. It's way too long.
I wrote down a lot of it, and then I was like, oh, well, this is just going to immateriality. And I was like, that's all right.
But I do think there was what it spoke to that particular moment, and I'm going to attempt in a clumsy way to tie this to what we're saying, and then maybe we're done, is what he's talking about resonated so much to me. I'm not going to repeat the passages, but it resonated so much, like it sounded like the book of Ecclesiastes. And I'm not trying to pigeonhole some more scriptural language in here, but it sounded very much like just, oh yeah, this is vanity, and this is vanity, and then this will happen, and then maybe something good will come from that, and then maybe after that, then the universe will expand and it'll contract, and all of these weird things will happen, and so much of, and I don't want to be dismissive to that speech, because that whole speech is actually pretty affecting, but so much of it resonated to me about a book like Ecclesiastes sitting in a moment like this, and I did write down one thing, and I'm hopefully going to reference this and then tie it back to the film, and then shut up. But there was this thing. It's in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it says towards the end, in verse 11, I should have written down the chapter, chapter 9, sorry. It says, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. And it's remarkable to hear a passage of scripture that partially sounds like it could just be basically like, oh, roll the dice. Like, who knows? Could be this, it could be that, it could be whatever. But in the context of the conversation we're having right now, and what you just talked about in terms of the life is hard, you are not important. I can't remember all of the 5
Yeah.
edicts, but the thing that resonates so powerfully to me is I have such a tendency in my own heart and mind to not only presume I can control things, but to heap upon myself insurmountable guilt when something happens, insurmountable guilt when something goes wrong or does not go about the way. And some of it's my upbringing, some of it's just the culture in which I came up, but this mountain of, well, this is all coming down on my head because XYZ decisions made however long ago. And one thing that I will say I love about this film is, with the exception of the cabinet scene with the Spanish speaking family, the film shows us no collision at all. There's the demolishing of the house and the shattering of the plates. It does not show us his accident. It does not show us her being told that he's dead. It does not show us so many things it could have. What it shows us instead is only aftermath. That's all it shows us. It only shows us aftermath after the thing has happened, because this film is not about the thing that happened. It's about what happens next. And to me, that is so, it was so resonant to me to recognize in this moment, like, yeah, there are ways in which we can navigate our time and our space, and ways in which we can observe, and ways in which we could even possibly influence or affect the flickering of a light or the clang of a piano or something. We are not completely devoid of influence of whatever moment or of space and time we're in. But all of that is secondary to recognizing, and as we're talking about here, recognizing yourself in the moment and coming to some version of epiphany, if you want to use that word, that will finally allow you to be free from the gridlock that you're in. An epiphany that recognizes, like, no, for some of us it may be, I don't think they're coming. For others, it may be finally seeing the thing you've been digging and trying to get at. For some of us, it may be looking into the eyes of your 3-year-old as this now is the most important thing that could happen in this given day. For others of us, it might be sitting with your wife or sitting with your son and simply knowing it's okay if we're not okay. And those moments of, again, no longer being absent under the weight of trying to pretend we're something we're not, and simply being what we are in full, complete truthfulness and full, complete openness, and allowing that to be what it is, whatever it looks like, however mysterious or complicated or hurtful or confusing that is. Anyway.
I'm gonna nuance in a way that I think you would have agreed with your past self here. You made a comment that the film is less that it's aftermath, that it's what happens next, and for me at least, a takeaway, and at least as motivated by how much this has energized me, I don't think, for me personally, I I'm tired of the what will happen next conversation. I think something this movie actually does for me is, it's not about what will happen next as much as it's what will happen now, or what is happening, and what are you going to do about it. Like, it's that immediacy, it's that materiality, it's that tangibility, it's that now, it's that presence. And perhaps to encourage you, This is going to be clunky because it's coming to me in real time, but
My entire conversation has been, so
it's
feel
all right.
free.
It's all right. The good news about the hard truths of initiation that I referenced a moment ago, those 5, life is hard, it's not about you, you're not in control, you will die, and the other one that's not in front of me now. The gloriousness about that, and the reason we only did Infinity War first, is there are partner goods to those statements that will be gotten to in time. But it's a bitter pill sometimes to be like, you guys, you're just these folks, you do this podcast, it's just a thing, like, you're not important.
Mhm.
And I want to kind of affirm that, but also say to you, my friend, a writer writes a novel, a symphonist writes a symphony, podcasters make podcasts,
Right.
and God doesn't exist in the microphones and the chords and the screwed up digital programs. Those are just physics, right?
Right.
But someone someday may hum a tune to what you're watching, reading, and listening to, a tune they used to know, and it's going to give everyone a little bit of hope.
Mm.
And I think, to me, come on, that's pretty cool.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yes.
That's it. It's
Yeah.
you live present, and you do the things not because you're important, and sometimes maybe not even because they're important, but because being present requires it. And
Yeah.
knowing ourselves as ourselves demands it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is when all we do is live in the future or live in the past.
Right.
You know, and that will make you want to clap and dance and cheer and sing,
It
and cry
does.
and
It
sing.
does. Last comment.
You
It's
just have
just
to.
in.
You had to. Didn't you?
No.
You had
It's
to.
just on my head. I'm not even.
Last
I'm not
word,
even gonna.
Lackey. That's what we
No.
called him back at Gardner Webb.
I'm not even. Everybody always got to have the last word. No, it's just I just didn't want to leave the conversation without the other scripture that it's bringing to mind when Jesus said, and who knows what he meant, and maybe he meant all of this and so much more. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the earth. And that again, presence, now, and am with you, not will be, was, all of that. All of that and more. So it's what came to mind when you were just sitting there talking, and I just didn't want to leave the conversation without it. But now I think if we don't, we're just going to keep ramping ourselves back up into even more. You want to go to the fog meter?
No, but I can. Fog meter. We are in the first step into what a conversation to have. I'm thankful to be having it with you and with our friends and foggers.
Yeah.
So the fog meter, fear and God, how scary, how substantive. Why don't you start with fear, Reed, of David Lowery's A Ghost Story?
This is a tough one for me because it does have some jump scares. Overall, it's very haunting, but it's going to hit you with a ton of different emotions. I think for its pure effect on me, I'm going to give it an 8.
Yes, I think in large part because of how well it plays with the humanness of its character. And I was it did its work well by luring me into a false sense of security, so that when Angry Ghosty starts acting out, I was like, oh my God. 8 might be a little high, not because I don't feel it, but because just in the best version I can think of to define the fear factor, screw it. I'll give it an 8 too. But I'm going to go first on the God. It's a 10. Just, it is an unreserved 10. We will occasionally work with the text and extrapolate. The text and the subtext are hold in them multitudes, and it's hard to even say this is definitively what this is about, or this is what it's
Right.
not about. And so I think there's substance to spare.
No, absolutely. For me, it's a 27.
Wait a minute. Oh, wait. Okay, 28.
No,
then.
this is
Last word
no,
lackey. Add it again.
this is absolutely a 10. I don't know if you don't know why this is a 10, you haven't been listening to this conversation. It's a 10. And you want to do the honors?
I wasn't doing the math, but sure. Like what?
Oh, sorry. You can cut this out. I just sent you a couple of texts with the math.
I'm not looking. I'm focused on you. I am present with you.
Understood.
Though thousands of miles away. You do it. Okay, I'm not.
Right.
Keep it in.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Okay, so that means that we give this David Lowery's A Ghost Story a 9 out of 10.
Wow. That's
the
awesome.
vlog meter.
That's
That's pretty heavy. And listeners, if you've been listening to this conversation, you know the answer to this, but I got to ask it anyway. Nathan, would you recommend A Ghost Story to people?
I have recommended it since watching it the other night to multiple people. I thought about rewatching it in its entirety before this conversation. I just couldn't make it work.
Yes.
Because I had to play with my 3-year-old.
Life is hard.
We just completely undercut the last hour of conversation. You guys are jerks.
So the only thing I will say is that the film is patient and requires patience of you. With that in mind, high recommendation. Huge recommendation. Enormous recommendation.
Guns N' Roses who taught us that all we need is just a little patience?
Maybe.
I think that's right.
Didn't listen to a lot of Guns N' Roses in my day, but sure, we'll go with that.
There.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that puts our first official installment of this little series that we're doing on The Leftovers Season 1 and films about ghosts in that context. That puts that in the books. Next week, we are going to be covering episodes 3 and 4 of The Leftovers. We are also going to be inviting a return special guest. One, Mr. Bill Oberst Jr. is going to be joining us again for a discussion about Peter Medic's film from 1980 called The Changeling, starring George C. Scott. And we will look forward to seeing you then, catch up with that film. In the meantime, Nathan, I want to thank you very much for helping me to try to wrangle this. I don't even feel like we scratched the surface. I mean, I feel like I'm going to need to go.
We kind of scratched the wall and...
Yes. Yeah. And the notes started to come out.
Our past self, or was it our future self, had already kind of done all the work.
Yes, all of that. So yeah, who knows what will shake up from the conversation. But listeners, thank you for having it with us. Nathan, thank you as always.
Yes.
And as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. Thank you again, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Stay safe. See you guys. Where's all the off buttons?